Welcome back to another episode of AGI Schools Out Saturdays, where we talk about preparing our students and our workforce for their tomorrow, not for our yesterday. I'm thrilled today to be joined by another Boilermaker. We've had a few Purdue students on here. It's always a pleasure. Umar Yasser is a junior in business analytics at Purdue University. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Umar.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me on. As you mentioned, I'm a junior in business analytics and information management at Purdue. I'm also pursuing a certification in entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm taking one of those classes right now, which is the consulting for nonprofit ventures, which is how I met Jason. He came in and spoke to us about the uses of AI in our various projects and how we can be best utilizing that. I'm originally from Pakistan, so long way away, other side of the world. Takes 2 days to get here, 2 days to get back. Um, but yeah, excited to be here. Looking forward to a good conversation.
So, not to get too much into it, but is travel like a no right now with what's going on in Iran? I know I've seen people stuck in Dubai. I'm not sure how much travel in that part of the world is feasible and how much it's not.
There's most of it is shut down. I know our Turkish airline is still running. I've had a couple of friends who are flying out tomorrow actually. But then there are other friends who had plans to go back to Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, that side of the world. Their flights have been canceled. So I think Qatar has been canceled. Qatar Airways isn't operating anymore. So it's high alert. It is not recommended. But if it's an emergency, then there are a couple of ways around it, but um, tricky. So we're all just monitoring the situation and hoping that doesn't escalate very, very quickly and everything stays safe. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure I speak for the majority of Americans who would say they agree that they hope that things don't escalate and that there aren't any complications with particularly the surrounding countries that have nothing to do with what Iran and the United
Correct.
States are fighting about anyway. So, but I know there is always fallout when there's a big war, and it affects a lot of people. So, let's
Mhm.
talk about artificial intelligence a little bit more cheery. So, for some, a little bit more cheery subject. So, let me throw one thing at you before we get in, which is of the developed nations, the United States is reportedly the least happy and excited about artificial intelligence. The public of the United States. What does that make you think when I said, do you feel that at Purdue? Are there students who are against it? Is everybody for it? Are they ignoring it? Like, what's the general vibe of your classmates?
Um, it's here, right? It's been acknowledged, it's been accepted. A lot of our conversations and a lot of our concerns are related to how is this going to affect uh, us, right? How is this affecting us when we're applying for positions, when we're expected to go out into the workforce in this year, next couple of months, next year? A lot of our conversations a lot of the questions that are being asked is, how are we supposed to utilize it, right? What impact does it have on us? Is it a negative impact? Is it a positive? Are we going to get replaced by our entry level jobs going to get replaced by artificial intelligence? And to what extent, right? And how do we, and a lot of my questions also stem from, okay, how do I use this to my advantage? It's here, it's being used. Some people are using it well. Some people don't know what they're doing, but are using it just for the sake of it because everyone's doing it. And so, how can we utilize it well? How can I, in my daily life or in the work that I do, in the strategies that I use for when I'm searching for jobs or applying for jobs, how can I use that as a tool and a beneficiary tool instead of thinking I'm using it well but wasting my time. It's present. It's been acknowledged. I think the main concern now is how do we make the most of it, and how do we ensure that we can equip ourselves the best way possible to ensure that we don't get uh, messed up by it.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's the entry level job thing is interesting in the sense that you know long term, it doesn't make sense to not have entry level employees because you will not have senior level employees if you don't have entry level employees. However, that doesn't stop Wall Street and big business and a lot of businesses from, in the short term. I mean, America is just one of those countries where we want instant gratification, and we don't always look at the ramifications of that. So, in the short term, there could be some pretty significant impact around that.
I agree. I think to your point, right? The more we use it right now, the more we integrate it into everything. How does that affect us 5 years down the line, 10 years down? And if we're getting rid of entry level jobs, if we're getting rid of um, entry level experience, where does that leave us in the next 15 to 20 years? How does that affect what I'm learning? Or when I go out into the workforce, how does that affect what I'm learning? How am I learning it? Um, my experiences communicating with people. Do we turn into oh yeah, here's an agent, here's a system that we've set up, interact with it, you can learn whatever you want about it. Right? If that happens, that gets rid of, that gets rid of this communication channel. Of Instead of I can go out there and then search out everything that I want to, but then I'm not gonna come and ask you questions, and we're not able to connect, we're not able to communicate. There may be some things that are out there, some experiences that you've had that you're not going to be able to communicate to me to a work, like a model or a workflow, right? And so how are we balancing that out? How do we ensure that we all just don't um, turn into or become so dependent on technology and AI and all of the tech that we have, where we are not communicating, we're not passing on our experiences. Institutional knowledge is lost in, somewhere in the midst of it all. So, all prevalent questions. Don't know who has the answers, but figuring it out, or at least attempting to.
Well, and I think there's a yin and a yang to all of it, right? So I've honestly, having been in the workforce for a lot of years, there are a lot of people who are very poor at communication. There are a lot of senior level people who are very poor at articulating exactly what their expectations are and then kind of expecting their subordinates to read their mind. And I have for the last couple of years theorized that, prompt engineering may improve that level of in- interoffice communication, because in order to get what you want out of a model, not just generic output, you pretty much have to define, what good looks like, what role you're wanting it to fill, and then what sources it should pull from, or what data it has available in order to pull the information. Now, if you told that to every junior level employee or intern, like, okay, here's what my expectation, here's what the role you're going to be filling today. Here's what we would like you to do, and all of the files that you have access to in order to do it, or tools you have access to in order to do it. And here are some metrics on what we expect as an outcome, rather than, oh yeah, you're here, like, can you fix our social media? Like, that's the kind of thing I hear in the workforce, right? Like, hey, make our social media better. Well, what the hell does that look like? What does that mean to you? Does that mean that you're getting 5,000 likes on every post, but none of it is funneling to your website, and you're not getting any, the click-through rate? Is that what matters to you? Like, so I do think that level of communication has become more important. On the flip side of that, I think that we've started to realize, and I will have to say, having been someone who does not have a computer science background and being now working with a lot of people who do, I find that population to be very kind, very welcoming, and very patient. But historically, they're not known for being the best articulators or communicators in a social sense. And so I do think that we're starting to realize that there's a value to where those two meet, right? Where you're a problem solver and a deep thinker and a systems thinker, but you also can talk to other human beings. Because, like you're saying, if everybody has the same tools, then something's got to set you apart. And that human element is going to be your ability to work with other people and get your ideas across and listen and plan in a human group way, not just, get a whole bunch of bots going that are doing the same thing that the guy next to his bots are doing.
I agree, and I think that's for me at least, that's one of the main things, or one of the main problems figuring out right now is, okay, how do I bridge that gap, right? How can I be someone who's bridging that gap between I can understand the problem solving aspect and I can communicate that, but then I can also understand the technology in a way where we can communicate to bridge the gap between the more technical people and then bridge that gap between them and the more business focused people making decisions who don't necessarily care too much about, like the day-to-day coding and programming. So yeah.
Super valuable skill to have. I mean, that is the message that I have put out there. Someone like yourself who's young, who somewhat understands this technology, who has either skills in business analytics or skills in software and computer science or data analytics. Like, I wouldn't go try to work for McKinsey. I wouldn't go try to work for Coca-Cola or 3M. What I would do is find a medium-sized company that doesn't have a big IT team, that really needs some young people at the table who can show them how to navigate this new world and how to move into the future, but is willing to speak to them in their language and isn't just talking over their heads all the time or talking about, well, the inference costs of this and that. And they're like, I have no idea what the hell inference costs. Like, what do you mean inference, right? Like, you have to be able to speak the language of the people that you're with.
Yeah, and I think figuring that out and being able to, in my opinion, that's not a one size fits all, right? I think that is
Yep.
why having a deep understanding, or at least I wouldn't say necessarily a deep, but having a broad understanding of different tools, um, and how AI systems work, right? Um, and then being able to then having the ability and the flexibility to adapt that or to uh, morph that into whatever your need, right? Because not every medium-sized company, for example, I mean, I think that's a really good shot, but having not every medium-sized company is going to be at the same stage of AI integration and development or technology integration and development across the board, right? So how do you learn the basics, and then have the ability and the communication level to then be able to go into different environments, different teams, and then I think I've seen a lot. I've worked with working right now with a couple of teams through my on-campus jobs where they've basically come to us and said, we want to use AI. We want automation. We want AI integration. How they want to do that? Absolutely no clue. Right? That's something that we have to figure out at the same time, there's a bunch of data, for example. Um, Not only cleaning up the data, but then also creating a template of sorts of, okay, sure, you want to get to this step, but in order to do that, I mean, here's a way how you can do that. But oh yeah, by the way, you need to fix your data, right? You need to fix the way your step 1, 2, and 3 is working in order for you to get to step 9. So I think I agree, there's a lot of value in there. But for someone like me who, again, I don't have that computer science background. I don't have that software engineering background. So for me, it's, okay, how do I bridge that gap, between AI, and my learning of AI and my business analytics?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm sitting here laughing and smiling because you're identifying the problem that all of us that have done any kind of AI consulting or really looked at what it takes to build out AI agentic workflows. And let's just be clear, like, because a lot of people will say, they have a custom GPT that's their agent. Well, that's not an agent. And agentic workflow is when your AI system leaves its environment, uses third-party tools, and completes a task without you holding his hand or telling it what to do along the way. So that in a regulated industry is a nightmare, first off, for security, particularly with a predictive model. So I think you are 100% right. Data is the problem. Data will be the problem going forward. It will be the slower down. However, it is so unsexy and so annoying that it's not the thing ever to lead with, because I've done that many times. Like, okay, yeah, we could totally do that, but first thing we have to do is migrate all your data onto a single platform and organize it in a warehouse so that your agents actually have like real-time updates and clean data that they're going to pull from, so that they're not just out there scraping the internet and doing whatever somebody on Reddit suggested that they do to solve your business issue, right? That they truly understand your business. But A, they don't really understand that. And B,
Mhm.
It costs a lot of money to do it. And see, so I think if you want to get rich going forward, like this is something that I've been thinking about, like figuring out how to step by step clean up the data, but be able to deploy AI while you're doing it in ways that they see real time value out of the AI, right? And sometimes that's just making their employees really happy, because I think re-engagement is one of the biggest things that chatbots does. Like when you have somebody who's been sitting at a desk for 20 years doing the exact same thing, now all of a sudden they have a ChatGPT or a Claude to talk to them more or less back and forth about
Mm-hmm.
their job, and in a language that resonates with them, they
Mm-hmm.
start to get a little bit excited once they see what it can do. If you can get that kind of excitement and that childlike curiosity going in a team around AI, then you can go, okay, if you really want to do like, if you want to make a bunch of money or you want to do something real agentic, that's cool. We can do that, but we got to take a look at the data problem now. We're at that point now where we got to talk about data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But so I mean, here's my um. I think I would take a step back here, right? If I am someone who, and this could be, I mean, I have a couple of friends who, I think one of my roommates actually is also working on, he's been doing a lot of research on agentic workflows, AI automation and integration into, uh, into a startup idea that he had. If I'm someone who is looking to learn about that, right? Learn about the basics, and the fundamentals of AI, because I think it's important, right? Um, where do we start? What is the best way to do that for a student who, any student who might say someone else from the business school or someone who is not from that computer science IT background? What are the resources and tools out there, and what is an approach or a good approach to figuring this out and familiarizing yourself with how AI works, what its benefits are, and what disadvantages and issues it.
There are two tools I think are really good for that, and it depends on how technical you are. If you have no technical background whatsoever, MindStudio is a really good platform for figuring out how to build agentic workflows with the help of with the help of a software. And it will help you to understand how to connect those, where you need prediction, where you need just structured prompts or skills. And it also has 70, well, last time I was there was about a year ago, about 70 models to pick from. One of the things that businesses don't think about, right, is yeah, you could run Claude Opus in an agentic on an agentic model, right? Or GPT has even a higher level one now. It's like $25 per million input and $120 per million output tokens. Like that's expensive as hell. Claude Opus is like $15 million per million input tokens and $30 per million output tokens. So yes, Claude Opus is a very good model that can figure a lot of things out. But if you just ran that, if you were somebody who didn't understand agentic workflows, and you're like, yeah, well, we'll just connect it to the best model, you'd have a $10,000 bill before you knew it, and being like, oh, it would have been cheaper to have a human do this. Like it cost me $5,000 for it to figure out how to put a new date on my calendar, right? But there's Amazon Nova models that are just like a small, like 5 billion parameter model that's like 0.01 cents per million out input tokens and 0.01 cents per million output tokens. It's not going to solve problems for you, but it's also not going to hallucinate very much because it's not very smart, right? But so if you have a piece of your agentic workflow that if you get an email that's flagged as important with a calendar invite, it puts that on your calendar. That's a great job for a Nova, right? And there's everything in between that. So actually orchestrating a multi-layered agentic workflows, you have to understand model selection. You have to understand adjusting the temperature on the models, because the temperature is creativity versus hallucination, right? So hallucination is not really a bad thing. That's why your marketing people have been some of the first non-techie people to use a
Yeah.
lot of AI, because in marketing, in storytelling and writing and literature, what one person calls hallucination, another person calls creativity, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, it embellished, but it made the story better. But you can't have it doing that in finance.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes a problem, right? Well, I couldn't really find that number, so I just kind of made one up based on everything I scraped off the internet. Like, so that I think if you're not real techie, MindStudio is a great place to do that. If
Hmm.
you're a little bit more technical and you actually want to take this skill into the workforce, N8N is a better place to do it.
You said NAN?
N and then the number 8 and then N.
Oh, okay.
So it is a little bit more of a learn. It's more like you're using cursor or an IDE, like so it looks more like you're programming inside of a computer. Now,
Hmm.
anything that needs to be written computer like code wise, even if you had to have something written, you can go to ChatGPT and say like write the code for this command, and it'll write it, and you can copy and paste it. So you don't have to understand how to write code. And I've not really used N8N that much. I don't think you have to write code in there anyway. But the good thing about N8N is it can operate on a machine, not in the cloud. So if you're going to a smaller business where
Hmm.
security is a big deal to them, or a healthcare business where security is a big deal for them, you can set
Hmm.
up an agentic workflow in N8N that never leaves the edge, that never leaves their premise and doesn't go off to the cloud, and that significantly reduces your security issues.
What has been in your experience, working with everything that you do, what is the benefit of having an agentic workflow? And is that something would you recommend even for a student like myself in day-to-day life, right? Is having an agentic workflow beneficial? What would that look like? How can I use that and not just cater to, say, for example?
Before January of this year, I would have said it's not really ready. But when they release OpenClaw, and OpenClaw is not safe, I don't suggest you go use OpenClaw. But what it did was it forced all the other big foundation model companies to expedite their agentic capabilities. So now, Cowork, Claude Code, like these things, yes, they are extremely useful, and you can. If you had a second computer, I just had my dad give me two of his old computers so I can get them turned back on, right? Like if you can connect a computer to a Gmail account and not have anything in there that you are worried about, like your school stuff, like I'm still not. If you don't know how to write code, I still wouldn't put agentic workflows into a computer where if it erased stuff, it would cost me my job or be a big problem
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
we see it happen, and it's always no coders that it happens to, right? Like it's not software engineers that are playing around with these toys that are like, oh, it erased my whole database. It's a no coder who's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that I downloaded something that had a prompt injection in it, and now like my whole database is gone. It
Mm-hmm.
did happen to one big company. That was probably a software engineer, but regardless, like if you can get a safe sandbox to play in, I would say play with all of this stuff because it is exponentially getting better and better and better and better. And so the more you understand how it works, let me take a step back and give you an analogy. So when I was a little kid, there was a cartoon about how a bill goes through Congress. It was called Schoolhouse Rock. And it was real goofy, right? But it was like this little cartoon icon went through the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, like explained to little tiny kids like how basically our government works when they're trying to pass a bill. All
Mm-hmm.
right. I think that we should be doing the same thing with how machine learning works and how large language models work. Because I think if little kids understood that level of what's going on under the hood, by the time
Mm-hmm.
they're 14, they wouldn't fall in love with a chatbot because they would understand what a chatbot is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um.
So if you
Why?
take
Why
that
do you?
into
Why?
business, go ahead.
I was saying, why do you think that's important?
Well, because you see, like there was a kid that killed himself on character AI because he fell in love with the Daenerys Targaryen chatbot. Like these,
Mm-hmm.
like anthropomorphism, and like that's the term for like thinking that these things are human when they're not. and
Mm-hmm.
like personifying onto it. Like there are huge swaths of studies that show that young people in particular, as well as lonely older people, are like building unhealthy relationships with ChatGPT or Claude, and they
Mm-hmm.
literally believe that there's like something in the machine that is alive and that has a soul, and that, you know, that is. And I think if you taught them from the time they're little, like the basics of what it means to build a model, to train a model, how it works
Mm-hmm.
underneath the hood, then by the time they're old enough to fall in love with it, they would probably, very few of them would, because they'd be like, no, that I understand why it sounds like a human. It's
Yeah.
good magic, but I understand the engineering of it, and it's not a human. It's
Mm-hmm.
not alive. The same for business. Like if you understand at a basic level how agentic workflows, the difference between a foundation model and an open source model, like if you understand all those things, you will be of value to business owners, because you will know the questions to ask, and you will be able to keep them from either doing something unsafe that ends up costing them a bunch of money in a lawsuit, or getting
Mm-hmm.
screwed by a snake oil salesman that's trying to sell them technology that's either overpriced or not what they need.
And this would be again. I would assume this goes back to your mid-sized company market, because the bigger firms have the tech and the money to understand that. I'm assuming they probably already have teams working on all of this and having it catered very, very specifically to their needs, and ensuring that their security guardrails are in place for the company data.
Yeah, even Indiana University Health, which we have here in Indiana, right? They had I heard a talk 2 years ago. They had a chief AI officer and two NVIDIA H100s. They're building their own system. Like, so they've got people that know what the hell they're doing, that are not just tinkering with this stuff. Now, might there be a manufacturing company like Caterpillar that is a huge company that doesn't have that tech? It depends on the industry, right? But I
Hmm.
think any industry where you see where they have historically had a fairly large IT team, and if they have data analysts on that IT team, they probably are understand what's going on and what they need to do, and are either contracting with people like McKinsey who are claiming to know how to do stuff like this, or have hired the level of people to do that. But anything below that, even a 500, 600, 700,000 person company, like it's not gonna be too long before they start getting out competed by the other companies that are leveraging this stuff, and they're gonna have to figure out how to use it. And their board's gonna be pushing them. We need to use AI, and they're not gonna know what that means. What does that mean? Use AI? Like how? How do I do that? They don't. The other thing other than data, that's a big major pain in the ass, and the reason why this has gone so well in software engineering, and is because any type of computer science job, it's all like pretty much mapped out how people do things in all across the industries, right? There are schemas to everything. That's a very analytical type of work, right? You go out to a 1,000 person company and say, what are your workflows? Nobody has a clue, right? Like John might have the entire workflow for accounting in his head. Nobody's ever typed it out. There's very few documented ways that things happen, right? And so you have to build all that before you can identify anything. And before you can get people to put the effort into that's the thing. I was just sitting with my boss 2 days ago. We're building, so we're going to be going and talking to some customers, some nonprofits about this AI that we have that can help their clients navigate a system of care, right?
Hmm.
And so we were putting together some marketing materials for them, and we're in Claude projects, and it's about a 3-day process. By the time we are finished building the skills and tweaking this Claude project, right, we will be able to design a folder and 5 to 7 assets that go inside that folder for any company by just giving it a link to their website and saying, okay, build the use case out build the folder out for us, right? So it will save so much time in the future. It's already almost finished. I have to do round 3 when we get off here today, right? But it's taken 10 hours of serious work and looking at it and going, okay, why is it out? Why does it think it should output this, or why does it think it should do that search? And figuring out like what didn't. It's not a technology problem. It's a human problem. I'm telling it the wrong thing, or I'm giving it too broad of a definition of what I want. So it's just pulling what's the average individual who's asked for this task to be completed, what do they consider the right way to do it? Here's for instance, a really good one. The app that we have that helps the client navigate the system of care, right? The case managers would really be the ones to show the app to the client, and then the client would use the app, and the case manager would get, if they have like case manager reporting software, would get reports from the app to their third-party software that would make their job easier. But they won't spend a lot of time personally on the app. It's not a liaison app. It's an
Mm-hmm.
empowerment for the person. All right. And the AI has a hell of a time figuring that out. It depicts everything as the case manager
Instead of the
interacting with the
client.
app,
Yeah.
because that's how it was done, because there weren't a whole lot of these things previously. And so any software tool that was being used in this capacity, it would have been the case manager using it. So that's what it was trained on. So in order to I have to really constrict the guardrails to say, no, you're not understanding like what
Mm-hmm.
exactly we need to do here. And eventually it'll figure it out, and then it will stop doing that. But I think a lot of people who are just business people, they're busy, like they don't have time to go through refining that and pouring their heart into it. And they don't yet have the understanding that, yeah, this might be a complicated problem and a lot of hours of grinding away on a computer. But once you're done, the amount of hours you will save going forward are exponential. So some of it's building that stuff for them, and some of it's showing them, holding their hand, walking
Mm-hmm.
them through it, and then showing them how great the outcome actually is.
And this could be applied to. Could you give a couple more examples of where this could be applied in a business case or in a business setting, right? Would this be
Sure. Go ahead.
no? So I mean, I would assume that you don't want to. I could be wrong, but is that something you do with, on the accounting side of things, the finance side of things,
Yeah.
or do you keep it more on, like you mentioned, the marketing side of things, just to protect data and have a bit more security in there?
I If I was going into a company and I just had it my way, that's where I'd start, is sales and marketing, because I think
Okay.
but that's also because I come from sales and marketing, so that's the easy, like somebody who's in finance. My old boss used to use this for spreadsheets and stuff all the time, so he might tell you the exact opposite. He might say, as an analytics tool, it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's where he would start, because that's where he gets the most ROI. I do know that one of the easiest ways in finance to get real value from it is to have it compare a lot of data and give you inputs from that data. So that was one of the things I did with our CFO at the last company. She could take 10 months worth of like income outcome reports and
Mm-hmm.
stick them into Claude and say, analyze these and tell me any trends that stick out. And if it's on the anomalies, some anomalies that she wouldn't have noticed, like, oh yeah, taxes were really high this month. You need to go back and take a look at that and see if there's a reason for that or if there was a mistake made.
So I I really appreciate you giving that example, right? If I were to do that, looking at data, um, providing insights, analyzing the insights, picking out trends, picking out anomalies, that is something that business analytics is pretty much based around. How do we do all of that and then link it to what the business needs and what the strategy needs are and what the problems are? How do I the fact that a model can do this, right? The fact that Claude can do this. how do I use that to my advantage instead of that becoming something that takes away from what I?
Well, one of the things I would do is that. So I'd find a few of those use cases of things that you're very good and knowledgeable in, and then test all the models on it on a regular basis, right? So go to Grok, go to Gemini, go to Claude, go to DeepSeek, go to ChatGPT, right? And just see how it does. When you know how it should do, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'll start to learn which ones are really good and strong at something, and you can actually blow someone's socks off who has been using AI but hasn't been using the right model for the AI. They all have very different strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ChatGPT sucks with Excel spreadsheets. It's terrible.
Yeah, but you know what? I have like a cartoon series, and now we're doing for this inserts that we're putting. We're doing like 5 panes of like a customer story, 5 cells of like the customer coming in, needing resources, using the app with the case manager, finding the resources, and then living happily ever after, more or less, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can ask Claude to describe those 5 cells based on the client and give me a prompt for them, and then pop them in GPT, and in one shots every single one of them beautifully. I mean, it makes just perfect. It does the same thing for the little like comic strip series that I have in my newsletter. I have somebody else write it, but another model write it, usually Claude or
Mm-hmm.
Gemini. Gemini writes fairly well too, but then I'll just stick cell by cell. I'll stick that in ChatGPT and go off and do something else because their image generator takes a minute and come back, and it perfectly does these animated images like nonstop. So knowing those little nuance, knowing that in a marketing when you're talking to marketing people is valuable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're talking to business people, what I would tell them, and my anybody who watches this has heard me say this before, is I think what you have to understand is what is the end game of the foundation model company. So obviously it has come to light that OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, what they're attempting to do, really what they see as their moneymaker, is becoming the next Meta or the next Google. The ads is where they see the money. They want as many consumers like
Mm-hmm.
paying either free or so they can pull their data and see how they're acting, or paying $8, but that they can pump ads out and get and charge for the ads. That's how they see their money coming in.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what we've discovered in the age of AI is that on social media, if you make people mad, that's the best way to keep them engaged on your social media platform. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
highest
Absolutely.
engagement
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You're rage baiting them. We even have terms for it. It's the
Absolutely.
opposite when you're having a one-on-one conversation with a chatbot. The more you flatter a person and make them feel good about themselves, the
Mm,
more they will stay engaged. So OpenAI is trying to keep people engaged so that they can sell them stuff in the long run, which means that they tell people what they want to hear a lot, right? And
yeah.
so that's not always good for a business. Like a CEO or a COO or a director of marketing, what they want out of a machine that is a
Mm-hmm.
coworker is something that gives them analytics,
Mm-hmm.
different ideas, and real feedback, like criticism, like emotionless
Yeah. Yeah.
criticism that says,
Yeah.
no, you should think about it this way.
Keeping
Right.
it real
So
for them, essentially.
exactly. And so Anthropic, which is the maker of Claude, they're really they want the business accounts. They don't really care to date about the person paying $20 a month or the person
Mm-hmm.
using their model for free. They want enterprises to sign up with it. So they're going to be less sycophantic. They're probably going to be a little less creative, but they're going to give you more straight feedback. And if you're trying to make business decisions between the two of those, I would go much stronger with a Claude. Google, I'm not sure has figured out exactly what they want to do yet, and I'm not sure they have to figure it out because they have DeepMind, which is a completely different branch of artificial intelligence that's solving pharmaceutical problems and all kinds of stuff that's worth. Oh yeah, Google DeepMind. If you haven't seen The Thinking Game with Dimas Hassabis, you should check it out.
First
So
time I'm
their
hearing. Is
CEO,
it? Sorry, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but wait, Notebook LLM is also Google, right?
it is, yes. NotebookLM is a Google product. Now, listen, Google has all the money in the world. They can print money. So it's not like they're not making good products, right? But I just
Uh-huh.
don't think they've really figured out who their end user is or what their end game is with those kind of products. Demis Hassabis, the
Yeah.
CEO of Google DeepMind, got a Nobel Peace Prize for figuring out protein folding. I mean, they're doing stuff at the drug discovery level and world model level that will probably have ripple effects way bigger than anything a chatbot or agentic AI and the workflows will ever do. So that come and then Elon, like, you never know what the hell Elon's going to do. I will tell you that Grok has the largest cluster of H200s all in one area. Colossus is huge, and so having all the same GPUs gives it a strength that others don't have. I find Grok is very good. I find it annoying to have to go to Twitter to use it. And I honestly use it if another model refuses to do something, because it'll do whatever you ask it to. Like, there's not many guardrails, but that's not a good business use case. But a
Mm-hmm.
business person is going to be thinking like, well, if Elon goes off the rails and decides like he has more money than God. So if he was in the same position Demis Hassabis or Dario Amade's in right now, which is Dario Amade pissed off the Department of War, right, and
Mm-hmm.
is kind of trying to stand his ground, and people are going, will Claude survive this? Will Anthropic survive this? Right? If
Mm-hmm.
Elon was in the same position, no one would be saying, will XAI or Tesla or whatever you want to call his companies survive it? Elon can do whatever the hell he wants to do. He doesn't have to be beholden to the government, which means if your whole business is tied up in his model and he decides he wants to do something a little crazy, you're along for the ride, right? Which to me is a little scary.
How do I? What are your thoughts on, you know, data privacy and data protection here, even from a personal point of view, right? Something, for example, something that we are very encouraged to do here in the business school, and that I've done as well, is I will pick uh, you know, I find an internship or I find a job position, pick out the job description, throw that into, whatever you want to, Copilot, Chat GPT, whatever,
Right.
throw that in there, upload my resume in there, right? And I'm like, okay, um, what is reformat my resume, re-edit my resume, in a way that suits, that fits the job description, right? Because we know that a lot of these companies, a lot of the big companies are using AI, to track, to review job applications. So it's like, okay, how do you got to play the system, but then, my resume is on there. My experiences are on there. My email, every, like, sort of the information that I have on there, and I can get rid of it. But there's still a lot of, my profile and my portfolio that is being uploaded. What are what are the what are the broader implications of that? Is that something to be concerned about? Is there a way to prevent that? I don't necessarily. I'm might be silly, but I'm someone who, I have my Siri off, right? I'm not one of those people who goes, "Oh, hey Siri, do this for me, do that for," because it's always listening, and I don't want, I've seen a lot of cases where it's just gonna pick up on random things that you never think about, and do stuff for that. So what does that look like? What are the implications for that? Is there anything that we, on an individual level, can do about that? Or, in order to stay up to date, stay with AI, being able to figure things out, that's just a sacrifice or a compromise that we have to.
It's a huge question. And I can only speak, I can tell you culturally what I think is going to happen, and I can tell you how I look at it. It used to be back when my parents' generation, your grandma would say, like, don't do anything that you'd be don't do anything that you wouldn't want me to see you doing. Right.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was, and so I think in the digital age, because there are so many things keeping track of everything we're doing, that's really good advice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially don't do anything online that you would care. So if I was back in college and I didn't make it through IU because I had too much fun while I was there, right? But I definitely would not have been I would not have been like capturing all that and putting it on my Instagram feed so that the
Mhm.
world could see, all the hell raising time I was having in Dunhill Apartments. Because that kind of stuff will come back to haunt you 10, 15, 20 years later, right? I even worry about my 15-year-old daughter and TikTok. I'm like, yeah, I know you're just like making these little dances and you don't think that there's any 50-year-old weirdos like watching them and following you and stuff. But the thing is, like, somebody's going to pull that shit up like 20 years from now and try to embarrass you, or could if you run for office. If you like, think
Mhm.
all the way
Mhm.
down the road. Think if I was gonna be, if I wanted to work for the FBI or I wanted to run for office, is there anything that I'm doing online that would prevent that? And that's probably a no-no, right? Now the flip side of that is, and I just heard on a podcast yesterday that somebody's developing a device you can sit on your table that's a jammer because wearables are coming,
Yeah.
right? So and I think if we were in Japan, society would not care at all. Like they think it's cool, they think it's effective, they think it's useful, right? And I am kind of Japanese in that sense. I side with the Japanese on that. Like I would have something recording all the time, not while I'm having dinner with my family, but business wise. Like
Mhm.
I'm fine. Have an ambient device that can tell us how to better do what we're doing, better communicate, records us all the time. People are talking shit about each other. They shouldn't be. So that's their problem. But I think that comes down to two things, right? Because I actually did a lot of this in my past company. They let me do it, and it was very effective. But I never weaponized it.
Mhm.
So, as soon as you get a company or somebody who's a real jerk who goes back through all those transcripts and starts weaponizing little things that people said about
Yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
now you have a huge problem, right? And then the other side of that is like, I think it's going to be a societal problem. So
Mhm.
if let's just say you and I are like total nerds, we think that Meta Ray-Ban glasses are kick-ass. We wear them everywhere. We're recording everything. It's not going to be long before the Karen at Starbucks knows what those are and throws a fit because we have them all
Yeah.
right. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think societal wise, there's a lot of arguments. Business wise, I just can't see where it's not so productive. I mean, manufacturing floors have been doing this forever, right?
Mhm.
Manufacturing
Mhm.
floors,
Mhm.
they use machine learning. They're recording stuff all the time. Airports record stuff all the time. So I think we just have to start with like, where is there really a good, valuable use case for this? And where are we just intruding on people to intrude on it? Is the break room somewhere where we need an ambient listening device? Probably not,
Absolutely not.
right? But the boardroom, it can be very helpful being in the boardroom.
Hmm.
I'll tell you that from a different angle, which about a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, there were a big thing for like the hang a shackle consultants that had learned how to use ChatGPT for them to try to sell people was a custom GPT executive assistant. So they would basically take as much information as they could get out of this person and build a custom GPT for them that would then help them make decisions. Okay. My
Mhm.
argument for that was unless you are recording
Every
nonstop.
single thing. Yeah. How are you updating the model?
Exactly. That's like promoting the secretary to chief strategy officer of a multi-global organization. That it doesn't make sense at all.
I agree with you, right? Because even I mean, unless you're constantly training it or constantly in that case updating, you know, so you at that so say you know 7th March 2026, you sit down and you input every single thing that you have on, right? But that is all based on the past. That is not reflecting what they're currently doing. That is not reflecting what they're doing 2 days down the line, 6 months down the line. And so, how can you have an effective decision maker if everything that they're basing their decisions on took place 6 months ago, right?
Yep.
When conditions were different, environment was different, um, possibilities were different, stakes were different. Um, so, I see your point of um, again, so the having something like that in the boardroom, for example, I think that could be very useful because it can allow you to pick up on little, comments, views, or provide suggestions of this is a conversation that took place. here, for example, and I guess you could prime it to do that, but here is a way that you could have improved so and so, or um, here is something that is a better use of your time, or this is a topic that isn't really relevant to what you and your company are trying to do, or what your client is trying to do. You know, don't focus on that too much next time. Sort of like a feedback suggestion loop. But then again, with that, how do you you're right. Like if someone in that boardroom, for example, 6 months down the line gets pissed off by someone, right? Or is offended by something, goes back, pulls it up and be like, here's a comment that you passed, or here's something, here's a joke that you cracked while in the middle of proceedings, which is inappropriate, and we're gonna use it to cancel you, and I'm gonna use it to blackmail you. Um, I guess who's responsible for that then, right? How do you make sure that someone doesn't turn around uh, and do that? Do you have a security system in place? Do you have someone who's responsible for, like is there only certain amount of people who have access to that content and to those recordings and to those transcripts? Um, but then if they were to turn around and do something like, how do you I guess to be honest, that's a risk that you got to take. That is a risk that is associated with um, using all of that technology to increase efficiency. But at the same time, I think it's one of the biggest questions there. How do you how do you prevent people from going crazy?
And that's a new social contract. And that's where either a consultant or a
Mm-hmm.
bright young person at the table who's willing to ask those questions is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It's the answers aren't as valuable at this point in time as us asking the questions, rather than us just charging into stuff and doing it and then looking back and be like, oh shit, we didn't think about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, when we were thinking about privacy or recording people, I was just thinking about whether or not someone would leak it and tell everybody on, in our competitor what all of our strategies are. I didn't think about the fact that if Dave said Molly looked nice in that dress, she would come back with a class action lawsuit 6 months later because she felt like there was sexual discrimination. And I'm not putting down that kind of lawsuit at all. I'm just saying like we don't think about everything, and the person who can come to the table and say, okay, I'm not saying this is a bad idea, but let's think through this really well and make sure that we have
Mm-hmm.
policies and procedures in place and that we continue to address these things as we move into a new way of working with each other. And I can tell you from personal experience over 2 years of doing this that it can be done without ever upsetting anyone. And it is really good. So we would take all of our leadership meetings that were on Zoom, stick them in
Mm-hmm.
NotebookLM for a quarter, and then go back and say, like, where did we have critical fails? Where did we say we were going to do stuff that we didn't do? Where did we shine, right? And it would give me an output that was so devoid of emotion that we could
Mm-hmm.
just use it for a conversation without offending anyone, right? So it was very, very useful. Or I also had where I would do like a chat with ChatGPT between an individual and me. And like 2 or 3 times a day, I would say, just tell the chat what you've been up to. So rather than having to fill out a spreadsheet to map your
Mm-hmm.
hours, which everyone hates doing, you're just having a little conversation with a chatbot. And then at the end of the week, we could go back and be like, okay, based on what we said we were going to do this week and what you've reported, like how did they do? Where could they do better? And then ChatGPT telling them that they took it so much better. They actually were like really encouraged by it and thought it was super useful. Whereas if the wrong person was delivering that to them,
Yeah,
they might have
yeah.
been really hurt and offended and recoiled and not continued to work. But I never, ever, and no one in the company ever, ever went back to a transcript and said, what did so and so say even about getting something done? It was just, what did we as a team say we were going to do? Who accomplished what didn't get accomplished, where could we have done better? So as long as you don't weaponize it, I think it's great. But that's saying a lot for a human. That's putting a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
reliance on humans to do the right thing rather than to be malicious.
I think so. This funnily enough, I think that just goes back to um, our conversation right at the start about communication, right? When you just mentioned that if the wrong person goes and provides that feedback, it can be catastrophic. Like I've seen that.
Yeah.
Um, I've experienced it myself. I've seen it a lot in some of the leadership positions that I've had, and I've been in teams. I've been a sports kid all my life, right? I've been in a lot of different teams, been in a lot of different environments. I had a couple of friends who I wrote for 6 years, right? I had a couple of friends my age, right? And there was a very, very, very specific way that you could provide feedback. Like I had a couple of friends who were on the same board. It'd be like, all right, this is what you're doing wrong. Get your shit together, and they would just take it in stride. Right. But then you have other people in the team who you got to be all nice with, and like, here's a specific trigger that you use, um, in order for you to provide that feedback, right? So I understand. I think having the wrong person provide that feedback could be catastrophic. And so in that sense, having someone or having like a chatbot where there's no emotion involved, it's third parties like, yeah, they're not out to get you. They have nothing against you. There are
Yeah.
no stakes involved. And they bring that in. I think that's great. But then if you go back to the flip side of it, of where I knew that my friend in my team, myself and my coach knew that if anyone other than us goes and talks about this particular topic to him or talks about his performance to him, he's going to blow up, right? So I think there's value in that too. There's value in that where um, the chatbot is not going to be able to help you because the chatbot has not had those past experiences, has not had that exposure, doesn't necessarily understand where said person is coming from. Um, and I think again, you're going to be in a situation where approach A is better. You're going to be in a situation where approach B is better. And so I think which is why it's important to. I don't think that we should then completely just become dependent on the chatbot providing that, right? Or the so say I mean I really like the idea of putting the Zoom recordings or putting the meetings in the notebook LLM and asking it to give you feedback of where we went wrong or what we could have done better, and then having a conversation based on. I don't think it's a good idea to be dependent on that completely because a lot of times in a lot of situations that human connection actually has a better impact the feedback loop compared to chatbot. So again, I think being aware of the use cases and advantages of both again is important because you're like, okay, you know what, here's something that is, not so sensitive. It's more general feedback to the team as a whole. Let me get Notebook LLM to spread that out and I can just tell that process. Whereas, okay, I'm in a situation here where Mark is, he's done something wrong. This is a sensitive topic. Um, sure, I mean, you can actually use, this is what I'm trying to talk about. What are some of the phrases that I should avoid? What are some of the strategies to use here? But at the end of the day, Chad is not going to know Mark, right? You know Mark, and how do you go in and so that to me is big question, a concern. I wouldn't say a concern, but how do we balance that out and make sure we're not losing that uh, connection at the end?
But see, I think everything you just said genuinely articulates all of the SEO points that people try to put in social media posts going forward. So people ask all the time, where are humans going to have value? And they say the answer is taste, discernment, strategic thinking. Like you just articulated what that looks like and what those differences are. Yes, you have to have discernment. Is Mark so much of a mechanical engineer type of dude that he's better off if I just give him a report from a chatbot because he just thinks so analytically that he'd prefer not to have a human and that's what makes him defensive? Or is Mark so much of an empath that if I just send a chatbot to tell him what he did wrong and I don't have a human being who understands Mark really well and knows how to phrase things and work with him, that's going to be disastrous on that end, right? So that is where the human that's where philosophy classes are probably, like I love philosophy when I was your age but it was hard to make an argument for why you were taking a philosophy class other than you thought it was interesting, right? Unless you want to
Yeah.
be a college professor, chances are you weren't going to do a whole lot with your philosophy. But that's the type of thinking that is going to be design thinking, philosophy, strategic thinking, being able to. That's another thing that I think you can show some of these business leaders, which is the difference between convergent and divergent thinking. And LLMs are amazing for convergent thinking. When you're talking about let's just throw the spaghetti against the wall. No idea is a bad idea. Here's a service line we're thinking about going down. Everybody, tell me what your ideas are on this. Like, it's awesome to have a couple LLMs in the room for that because they may come up with shit that you would have never even thought of, right? But
Mm-hmm.
by the time you get down to we're going to try to create a prototype and a go-to-market strategy, you need the discernment of a human being still who can do that divergent thinking and say, okay, this is what the chatbot that was trained on the whole internet doesn't know about Lafayette, Indiana, and people in Lafayette, Indiana, and yeah, if you were to take the feedback of the United States as a whole, this product would probably go over real well in certain
But not
neighborhoods,
for
but it
this.
won't go over well in this one,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So how do you um I would say actually, how do you push back against the whole thing of, oh, we want to use AI, we want to use AI, use it for everything, use it for this, use it for that. How do you push back against that and state that value of, of that the value of humans and our discernment and our ability to understand that, yes, sure, from a general overall basis, this sounds great, but for our particular use case here, um, how do you, like, it is not going to be valuable. So how do you, as someone who, if I were to go in and have a conversation with a stakeholder and be like, sure, this AI is great and all of that, but this is where here's where I can bring value. Here's how we as humans, in our opinions, bring value. How do you make sure that you are just not, uh, that's not just dismissed as a load of crap, right? Yes, we know this is how humans, this is arguably the best way that us humans can utilize our abilities and our skills and ensure that AI is a tool that we use, right? But in the race that everyone is in to use all of the new technology, how do you phrase that, right? How do you make sure that that is still a topic um, being considered and understood by people who are making decisions?
So I think that's where the nuance comes in, and that's where actually people who don't have computer science backgrounds but understand AI actually have a strength because essentially what you have to do is explain to them how things can go wrong and why the technology is at a place
Yeah,
where it can go
yeah.
wrong. And if you do that in a way that's real technical, they will not understand what the hell you're talking about. But if you do it the way that you would explain it to your little sister or your mom, they will quickly like predictive versus deterministic, right? Like most business people don't know the difference between machine learning and large language models. And so if you can just help them to understand that Power BI and the deterministic workflows that they've had in the past, that for some of those that's exactly what they need. And I usually do it by explaining the strength, how things that are perceived as a like a flaw in a large language model are actually not a flaw at all. They're by design. For instance, hallucinations are by design because it's a prediction
Hmm.
model, right? You want it to be a little bit more creative. You want it to make some decisions on its own. So, but
Yeah.
because it can do that, you don't want it doing stuff that you have a one way to do, and you don't want anybody else doing anything. That's where machine learning comes in. That's where a deterministic workflow comes in. Doesn't mean that you can't automate it. It just means you're not going to throw Claude at it,
Hmm.
or else, and then you give them an example of how it could make a really bad decision and cost them a whole bunch of money, and then they go, "Oh yeah, shit, I wouldn't want that to happen," and then they start listening a little bit more closely. Regulated industries, it's very easy to make the argument for why you shouldn't use agentic workflows outside of like simple admin tasks. But The smaller the business and the less regulated the industry, the more difficult it becomes. And you know what? I think there's an art to figuring out what their risk tolerance is. So, what helping them decide like what's good enough, what's definitely not good enough. Are there even models out there that can meet your standards of good enough on a regular basis? How many times would they have to have an output that you would consider good enough? What percentage of their outputs do you need to consider good enough before you feel like it's worth replacing that person within? For a candle shop, it might be good enough is right 60% of the time, because
Mhm.
I pay hourly workers who don't do what I want them to do most of the time anyway, right? But for Eli Lilly, it's going to be 99.8% of the time, or else it's going to cost us a whole ton of money.
Mm. I got my notes in. I'm taking my notes.
It's just as helpful to me as it is to you to talk through things like this. I do think that I the biggest shout out that I give, if you look at the companies that are destroying it, right, that are just really they are hiring young people who are smart. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at Andrel, which is more or less like the Tony Stark type defense company, that their CEO is 32 years old, Palmer Luckey. He wears Bermuda shorts and flip flops everywhere he goes, right? His whole team is in their 20s and 30s, right? And they are creating drone swarms and things that people my age just would tell you it wasn't possible. And you can't tell these guys it's not possible because they still have a young mind and they still have an imagination. And they're like, screw you, it is possible. And Elon hires a lot of young people like that as well. So I would just give a huge, huge yell out to anybody out there who's looking to navigate the future, which is going to change real quick, real fast. Make sure you're bringing young people into your folds. Don't hire, people that don't have a good work ethic, but find yourself some good young people who still have an imagination and who have a curiosity about this, and let them help you figure out, because none of us really know, right? It's different. I work with software engineers, and sometimes I show them stuff. They're like, oh God, I can't believe you got that out of a large language model. And I'm like, yeah, it's a different skill set, right? I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't program one, but I have figured out how to manipulate them in ways to get answers I want, or workflows I want out of them. And so stay with it, and don't like I would definitely lean into that human connection if I was looking for a job, because you did point out something that's true. Companies are using AI to weed through the resumes they get. People looking for jobs are using AI to write the resumes. What we really have right now is just this flywheel of AI against AI, right? And so you're probably going to have to get out there on LinkedIn. You're going to have to get out there in person. You're going to have to meet people, have other people introduce you to other people in order to land that job that you really want nowadays. A resume slipping through the AI flywheel is that's kind of a crapshoot.
I know. I'm experiencing it.
I'm
Uh,
sure you are.
as we all are. I just wanted to right before we end up, books, podcasts, any sort of resource that you would recommend, to A, for someone who is looking to broaden their understanding, right? Keep in touch. Not, I mean, and I know it's very easy to just get overloaded with everything out there, but um, keep in touch with the AI space and what's going on there and what are sort of the basics you need to know. And then B, um, if you're looking to go a bit more into depth into certain industry spheres, workflows, whatever that may be, certain capabilities, um, what recommendations would you have for learning materials or resources or how to go?
So the AI Daily Brief is a really good way. It's a podcast that comes out. He does a really good job of just kind of keeping you in the loop with what's happening on the AI front as new
Okay.
releases come out, as things change. I actually think This Day in AI, which is a couple of software dorks my age, who are fun. It's once a week, but they dig in and they keep it playful. And so either then, I think Existing AI might be the two Australians. Me my I don't know. They're look around, but I would say find one source, and the AI Daily Brief is a really good one. And then listen to a few podcasts where they actually talk about use cases and how to do things, and
Okay.
find one that resonates with you and follow that and listen to it.
Okay.
I started reading, there is a book out there called Building a Large Language Model from Scratch that is intended for non-AI scientists to understand the whole inner workings of a large language model. I would swear to you that if I make it through it, I will be 100 times smarter about AI. I can't promise you I'll make it through. It's so dry. It's just, it's a bit much. But I mean, keep it fun. That's what I would say. Find sources of information that you find interesting. If you like watching videos, follow some YouTube people. If you like listening to podcasts while you're running or in the shower, find some credible. And then the other thing that I would also say is if you're really trying to get into this, like everything is so political nowadays. If you have a hard opinion, like I'm a pretty hardcore Republican, so I have at least two very Democratic leaning AI podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis. Always look to get the other side's opinion on things.
Okay, yeah.
Just to keep an open mind, right? Like there's a China Tech podcast I like to listen to. The guy, he's American, but he's married to a Taiwanese woman, and he does nothing but study Huawei, Alibaba, Baidu. Like I love listening to this dude because I get a completely different perspective of China Tech than I do listening to Jensen Huang, who wants to kick China Tech's ass.
Sounds good, man.
All right. We got to check back in. Stay in touch. Let me know how things go. Let me know if I can ever help. And once you are out there and working and stuff, you got to come back on and tell us what you've learned and what it's really like out there.
Don't jump ahead of yourself, man. But now we'll absolutely figure that out. I do have a Purdue basketball game to catch. Hopefully we don't. I don't know what to expect, honestly, but hopefully it's not too bad. I appreciate this, man. To be honest, I didn't know what to expect. Haven't done something like this really ever. But I appreciate you having me on. It's really nice meeting you, and talking to you today. Keep what you're doing, man. I like it. I think it's cool. I think a lot of people are gonna find value out of it. I certainly am. Yeah.
Umar, thank you. I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there that will love the questions you ask and the answers you brought to the table. So this was a win-win all the way around.
I hope so too. I hope I can find them soon. Time's running out. But you have a good weekend, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Go Boilers.
Yes, sir. Boiler up.
Whoa, man. Things just get real. Looks like this dude's riffing on 11 Labs. Is this guy using 11 Labs? And I wonder what model he'll work with next week? Yeah, ride that wave.